The main topic of conversation today, and something that we talk about day in, day out, is human risk management and how to really help build a resilient culture with humans being centred at what you do. A bit of background about myself: I've had 9 years actually in HR tech before I moved over to KnowBe4 18 months ago. And it was a bit of a transition from the world of HR into cybersecurity, but I've actually never seen more transferable skills from one industry into the other, because everything that you do in cybersecurity really comes back to that human-centred approach in terms of how you're engaging your employees. And having the best tech in the world is great, but if your employees don't believe in it, and neither does the culture of your business, it's never going to land well. So it's been an interesting roller coaster, but one that I'm very excited to be on. And with that, the mantra that we, and the kind of our bread and butter at KnowBe4, is that people really are the critical layer within your organisation, and this is no doubt a common topic of conversation for everything that you do. And we've seen a massive shift in the evolution of risk management over the years, and even when I was in kind of HR world, we'd constantly be talking to compliance teams and security, and sometimes they were our biggest barrier to entry to get anything to take off, because there's a lot of compliance that comes with it. But it's moved very much from that kind of checklists, audits, and kind of rigid controls into a world where actually we really need to look at that human-centred strategy that acknowledges the real complex behaviours that are at play. So looking at, the individual in terms of the impact that that's going to have, their role, the human factors that come into it. If you actually look at the cybersecurity breaches, 80% of data breaches in the UK come from human error. And that's because, as I mentioned earlier, even with the best tech, as soon as that individual clicks on a suspicious link, you've rendered all of those controls that you've got in place. And let's face it, we're all human. Nobody in this room, I can imagine, or even myself, turns up to work to intend to make a mistake or to click on a link. If you do, that's a different conversation. But generally, life, we have a lot of external pressures. We have our own personalities to contend with, our own risk factors, and a bit of a funny one, it sounds a bit like the dog ate my homework. We naturally practice what we preach at KnowBe4, and we get sent phishing links, all the time. Is it real? Is it fake? And it's quite hard to judge sometimes. And my 2 little children were playing outside, came in, I knew it wasn't real. And no word of a lie, my little boy nudged my arm and I clicked on the link, and I got absolutely put into remedial training. And trying to explain that did definitely sound a few months in like I was trying to get out of it, but it absolutely happened. And that's as easy as I say, I was in the moment, I was being a mum, trying to do my work, and I clicked on a link that luckily was a fake link, but it could have had a detrimental effect, and that's just life that comes into play, and it's understanding those factors that can have that. So human error really is something that we pride ourselves on to try and conquer. And what is human risk management? And I hear a lot at the moment that this is, human risk management has been around for a while, but it's evolving. It's a different conversation day in, day out. But ultimately, we see it as that kind of structured approach to, identifying, assessing and mitigating the risks associated with that human behaviour, such as I spoke about. And it's looking at kind of the tech you've got in place, it's looking at the behavioural science, but also more importantly the culture within your organisation, and how is that trickling down from senior leadership level right down to employees who are there day in, day out, using the technology that you provide them with, and kind of looking at those kind of systematic factors. And to put it into context, and I probably don't need to tell you this because you're all here in this room today for a purpose and at this event because you're passionate about cybersecurity and you want to learn more about it. But if you actually look at the financial impact for organisations, the average cost of a data breach in the UK has risen to 3.2 million. We hear in the news regularly, we're at the top of it, and actually I had an organisation on here today that I was going to talk about, but I actually don't like to name and shame all the time because, companies can't always account for those errors, and it's one human behaviour that might have clicked on something that then has a massive detrimental effect, both actually not just from a revenue standpoint, but also for their logo, for their brand, and you've got to be really conscious of that. And effective human risk management, we break it down, and when we talk to organisations, into 4 layers with an acronym of DEEP. So looking at defend, educate, empower and protect. Again, you'll naturally have tools in place, inbound, outbound, email security. You'll have different organisations that you work with, multiple vendors, I can imagine, to do that instant threat factor of detection of what's coming in, what's coming out. And that's great. You need to have those in place. But you've also then got that layer of human risk, which is educating your employees to really understand the impact. And it's not scaremongering, and we have a real culture in our business, things like I just said to you today where I clicked on the link of share those stories, be really open with each other about something that, I've received this email, I'm nervous to click on it, or I did actually do that. Learn and educate each other, and don't fearmonger your employees to think that they can't actually talk about what's happened. Empower them to be open so that you can all learn from that, and that they know that it's not a scare tactic, or I need to bury my head in the sand here, because as soon as they click on something and bury their head in the sand, there's nothing your HRS teams can do in order to try and support that. So it's really about kind of empowering, that educate and empower, no blame culture that we talk about in order to help individuals to do that. And again, protect. So that comes back into sharing intel, getting people to speak up, have those champions within your organisations who are the people on the ground that can really speak for you outside of just senior leadership endorsing it. So we've spoken kind of like, what is human risk management? Why do we need it? There was actually a really interesting, I'm not sure if anyone's seen it, but in the Global Cybersecurity Outlook, so the World Economic Forum, I'd definitely recommend downloading it if you haven't. This is just a snapshot on it. They talk about kind of what does cyber resilient organisations look like? What do they invest in that makes them cyber resilient, if you like? And that is very much training and awareness programs, which we've spoken about if you look at that defend layer in terms of educating individuals. Having dedicated support teams, so those champions, and I'll go into that in a bit more detail. Anonymous reporting channels, look, there is never a one-size-fits-all for anything you have in your business. You'll naturally have people that are more willing to speak up. You'll have extroverts, introverts. You'll have different generations coming in, Gen X, Gen Z. You'll have different people in your business that feel more comfortable to talk about this. So look at your reporting channels, have different lines of the way people can, come forward and say, I've done something here, I'm not sure it was okay, or just I've got something, I want the team to check it, the SOC team to have a look at it. Again, recognition and reward programs. We see quite often that there's a lot of fear of messing up with any tech, and I absolutely get that. You're going to the board, you're asking them to put their hands in their pockets and spend, and you might have been burnt before as well by a supplier that you've used. You've seen really low engagement, low adoption rates, so trying to get something new in is half the battle because you've been burnt before. And actually having a sort of reward and recognition built in as part of your engagement tool to get members to do it. We have that built into ours as well. We have it's called like a monthly fishing game, the Golden Fish, and every member within our organisation that's clicked on a link to flag it as part of a campaign that's gone out, they'll go in and they'll be awarded with award code points. And naturally we believe in what we do, so it's an easy way to drive engagement because it's built top down in our business, but we still like the recognition and we still like the money that we get in terms of the Golden Fish. So there's ways you can be creative in terms to bring that about. And again, those reporting metrics are so important. So you can actually look at your baseline percentage of, if you do run a campaign, who is clicking on it, to then look at, over time, the different tools that you're using, how are those metrics being reduced. And, it's probably easy for me to stand here and say, do this, do that. It takes time. It's never a quick process to actually build a culture of security. And I often say to my team when they're speaking to organisations, and a one-size-fails-all. You need to understand where an organisation is at now in terms of their cybersecurity journey and what they have in place and where they want to get to, because it's going to look very different, and you don't want to overwhelm with certain products that we might have or certain conversations. So there are certain, when we've got a piece that came out that we can share, which is kind of the 5 best practices when implementing a successful security culture. And again, it's all about people. It's understanding your people. How do you drive engagement? So that looks at, creating champion networks. You'd be really surprised at how many people would put their hand up that are so passionate about cybersecurity within the business and tech and want to be at the forefront, talking to their, people within the business about the importance of why do your training. Yeah, I know it's a bit of a ball. Sometimes it comes up every month. You might not want to do it, but why do you need to do it? Why do you need to understand the risk factors within that? And often, senior leadership people don't feel they can relate to as much, therefore their team members they can. So creating that champion network, sharing stories I've spoken about, but again, just those little anecdotes, turning it into fun, having it on your monthly newsletter perhaps of risks that nearly happened, how they were averted, or that they did click on a campaign and they didn't mean to, but now they understand and they've gone into that remedial training. Consistency is key. It's like, beginning of the year, and I know we hear this all the time, you've probably heard it in so many speaker sessions, it's January, I'm going to join up to the gym. It trickles down, you start, and you don't always continue as it means to go on. And we very much talk about that practice and repeat. Creating a culture is behaviour change, and we all know it takes on average 21 days minimum in order to start creating that new behaviour, and that's doing it practice, repeat, practice, repeat. So whatever you're doing needs to be done on a regular, consistent basis so that your employees start to feel that this is actually just part of your organisation, it's part of who you are as a business, and that they can relate to it. Choice architecture, again, looking at the tools and the systems that you have in place. You're going to, you might have white-collar workers, blue-collar workers, you'll have different demographics within the business, you'll have different learning styles of who you're trying to engage. You need to be able to adapt and have enough different type of provision within that, within any phishing campaigns you're rolling out, within educational tools that can really speak to all different employees depending on how they want to interact and retain that information. So making sure you've got that creativity of choice to be able to adapt. And again, user-centric. We're all people. How do we want to engage? How do we want to learn? And that's where you have to put yourselves in the feet of your people within the business and understand, okay, what have we done well that's worked before? What hasn't? What do we need to do? And one that's not in there, and I'm really passionate about it, is senior leadership endorsement. I think getting buy-in is one thing, but your leaders need to be on the same level. And I was at an event last week, actually, and a lady came over to me, and she heads up part of the IT department, and she was saying, I'm really tired of feeling that this just sits on my shoulders when it's part of everybody in the organisation. And she's not alone. That's a really common conversation we have, and I think that's where we need to start breaking those barriers, that actually cybersecurity doesn't just sit on the shoulders of the SOC team. It trickles into your compliance, your HR, leaders, to be able to champion and talk the same message, because if they believe it and they set the scene, your people will start to believe it as well, that this is the true culture of where we're going, and empower them as to why they need to do that training, why they need to protect the business and the risk that can happen both to them in their personal life but also to the business. So those are some of the key areas, and we can share after this the recent white paper that we created in terms of building a successful security culture. And again, it's not easy to do. Trying to, if we look at the kind of scale of our security maturity model that we have where we are, it takes a while to get there, and you're probably looking at your large enterprise organisations that still aren't even there but are getting there or thereabouts. They've got more money to spend on provision. But that kind of an implementation roadmap, what does it look like for those that might be considering that we really want to embed this as part of our organisation? So, assess your current human risk profile, look at your people, look at what you've got, what are those behavioural factors that might influence that, and identify those key behaviour drivers. Who are the influences in the business that you really need to get in front of in order to start talking about educating and awareness in terms of to your employees. Design targeted interventions based on those drivers, measuring outcomes. The only way I know really when, let's face it, head up a sales team, if you want to get buy-in, and you need to show the ROI, you need to show the board what they're getting back in return, because sometimes that's the only bit that makes the difference between a sale and not a sale. And therefore, you've got to really show them the data back in terms of the impact of what they're doing here and why you need to have it. And what I've spoken about in terms of there isn't that one-size-fits-all approach. Be prepared to adapt and flex. You might, roll out something and it doesn't land so well first time, but learn from that and see how you can adapt and flex it, and that's okay. Change doesn't always come easy, and again, we're learning as we go a lot of the time. The world is evolving so fast in terms of the tech that we're using and the environment out there. And just look at that consolidation of provision. Something we're really passionate about is don't lead with human risk management as something separate to what you do as a business. Everything I've spoken about today in terms of that organizational culture and embedding it into the DNA as a business. And just importantly, there is no quick fix. I wish there was, and you probably know that. It's a journey, and a journey that, naturally we're as an organisation here to support you with, but also other teams within the business that you all need to lean together to work together in order to create that. Before I round off, I know I said my name was Clare. Has everybody heard about KnowBe4? Okay, that's good. Seeing some hands in the room. But just a bit of a quick synopsis about who we are. Everything we do is human-centred. We started off as a business basically looking at how do we train employees to combat the risk of, infiltrating your business. We have massively evolved in that time, as has the world, and we recently acquired Egress last year that are now part of our business, who do more inbound, outbound security. But we are very proud to be, trusted by 47 of the world's top 50 cybersecurity organisations who actually use what we do. And we actually have a stand, I won't go into too much, but we have a stand in the main hall, which, apologies being last minute, I don't know the exact number of where we are, but we are in there. Absolutely, we've got a fantastic team who are there to talk about our human risk management platform. And again, meeting you where you are in your journey to understand what you've got in place, is it working, and how can we potentially support that. And that's all I have for today. So thank you for having me, and sorry it was a bit rusty.